right, now I just made a video on neuro-linguistic programming and how people talk to each other and stuff. But in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about Black's Law Dictionary and my use of certain sources to make the points that I want to make to people. So when I first started this channel, one of the things I wanted to do was to always show people something in writing or in a picture that could help them understand what it is that I'm trying to teach them. And one of the things I used was Black Law Dictionary to help people understand the difference between a dependent and independent person or state. Okay, so when I'm talking about the state and sovereignty, Black's Law Dictionary defines a dependent state as a non-sovereign state, and it defines an independent state as a sovereign state. So people have come back and said, well, Black's Law Dictionary is this and Black's Law Dictionary that, and we shouldn't use Black Law Dictionary and all these things. Okay, that's fine. It's still, no matter what you think of it, it is still a source of information. Even if it's a source of information to which points you into understanding how they view things, okay? So if they view things as a dependent state as being non-sovereign and an independent state as being sovereign, okay? So let's just take the words in their most general and broad sense, okay? If you're dependent, that means you have to depend on someone else for something, your well-being, perhaps, a place to live, food, shelter, education. If you're independent, that means you don't depend on someone else. That means you are free to do as you want. If you're dependent, you have to follow some rules, right? Because if the government is giving you welfare, you have to, when you want to buy food, you have to buy certain foods, right? Or at least that was when I was a kid and we were on welfare. We could buy the Cheerios and the bread and the block of cheese and stuff like that. Nowadays, I think they've expanded that so that you can buy other things, but I think it's still within the confines of certain types of food. So when you're on welfare, you have to follow certain rules. When you're in Section 8 housing, you have to follow certain rules. When you take an oath, you have to follow those rules. When you join the military, you have to follow those rules. Now, just pretend like we've never heard of Black's Law Dictionary before. It doesn't exist. We don't know what it means. You're still in a dependent state. You still have to, if someone is giving to you a handout and taking care of you, you have to follow their rules. My children who live in my house, they have to follow my rules, okay? If I'm married and, well, I am married, but if you're married and your husband is the head of the household, you have to follow his rules, right? To some extent, I guess that's the way it was in the old days. If you have a job, you're dependent on that employer. You have to follow their rules because you're dependent on them to work so that you can pay your bills and take care of yourself. So you have some independence away from work where you're at home, you can do what you want. If you own your home, you're independent of mortgage companies. You don't have to follow the rules of the mortgage companies. So when you're independent and you're, let's say you're 20 and you get a job and you go out and you get an apartment and you have a car, you're independent in many respects from your parents. And so you don't have to follow their rules anymore. You want to go out party, you want to come home late, you know, you want to do other things. You are independent. So in some senses, you are sovereign. You're sovereign to your parents because you don't have to follow the rules anymore. When you're dependent on them and you're living in their home, you're not sovereign, because you can't do what you want to do. Even if you're 50 and you're living in a home somewhere where you need help and assistance, you have to follow the rules. So you're no longer sovereign. Now, I'm using the word sovereign sort of just to make a point, because in politics, sovereignty is a little bit different, not exactly different, not a lot different, a little bit different. But when you create something, you're supposed to be sovereign over it. You're supposed to control it. And the people create the government. So the people are supposed to be sovereign to the government. We're supposed to be independent of it. We're supposed to have it do certain things for us. And for those purposes, we're not sovereign. They are. But for everything else, we're sovereign. Okay? So in some respects, you're independent, and in some respects, you're dependent. We depend on our military to do its job and protect us and not get us entangled up in crazy wars that only serve the bankers and the rich, because these are our children, our sons and daughters being sent over to fight these wars and get killed or injured or their legs blown off or whatever. So we have to understand Black's Law Dictionary is a good reference. Okay, it's still a good reference, whether you like it or not, or you want to argue with them about the meaning of their words, or what everything is and what it isn't, and what to use and what not to use. It doesn't matter, okay, because they're still using the words dependent and independent, non-sovereign and sovereign. They're still using them in the same way that you would in any dictionary or encyclopedic dictionary talking about regular words and phrases that we would use outside of the law or outside of politics. Okay, so they still apply. They're still good definitions to use. And please consider thinking about what people are saying when they say, don't use that dictionary, don't listen to that person, they're saying this and they're saying that, when it's still, if you think about it, it still makes sense. Okay, so Black's Law Dictionary, when they use dependent state and independent state, it still makes sense. Okay, so it's still a good reference to point people to. But you can also use a general dictionary, which probably won't say things in the way that is as clear or as upfront as some of these legal dictionaries or law dictionaries are. They're clearer than the general dictionaries, which state things in more general and broad terms to encompass a whole wide variety of things, whereas the legal dictionaries more contain themselves to the political sphere. So that's my video for those people who had an issue with me using Black's Law Dictionary to help them understand dependent state and independent state, okay? So a dependent state is something that's being controlled. An independent state is something that's not controlled. So if you don't want to be controlled by the federal government, you need to reclaim your independent state. And the Articles of Confederation uses these three words: free, sovereign, and independent. Okay, so I think it's Article 2. Article 1 says the style of the Confederacy is the United States of America, and the states shall remain free, sovereign, and independent, subject only to the constitutional, the things in the Constitution. This is why they don't want you to read the Articles of Confederation. They want you to pretend it doesn't exist, because it says right there, right in the beginning, that the federal government's Constitution, it's supposed to be taken in a strict constitutional sense. Okay, so the Jeffersonian type view of the Constitution, in that it says what it means and it means what it says, and there's no implication to be made. The dependent states are those states in the Constitution that the federal government has control over, which are in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, where it talks about the seat of government and places purchased for defense. So the Constitution was created for defense and general welfare, and general welfare to me just means a good defense with a C, not with an S. And that creates a dependent state or dependent states, and that the Articles of Confederation acknowledges that the states are free, sovereign, and independent, and that they shall remain that way, subject only to the things specifically listed in the Constitution, which is the same thing that I've basically been saying for a long time now. And it's really important, I think, for us to understand dependent state and independent state, and anything that you can read or find anywhere written in any book or anything that will help you understand this is probably still good information. Take everything basically with a grain of salt, is what I say. So that's your video today on Black's Law Dictionary and the states.